17th of March 1968, Mr. J. Krishnamurti's third and last public talk in Rome.
This is the last talk, at least for this year. I would like very much to go into a very complex problem that needs a great deal of exploration, great deal of examination. And if we could this morning inquire together into this question, I think it will have a great significance. As we were saying the other day, what is important is action, not a lot of talk, theories, beliefs, but rather what one has to do and what must be done in a world that is so disorderly, there is so much violence and destructive forces at work. And there are many explanations for these anarchistic activities all over the world, both in the East and in the West. Nobody has organized this revolt. It has come into being. There is no central organization that has aroused the students all over the world to revolt. But it is going on. And there is the war. Of course, it doesn't touch this country, but it touches the whole of the East. I mean, America. The war, as we said the other day, any war is our responsibility. Each one's responsibility. Whether you are an Italian, or an Englishman, or an American, or a Russian, or a Vietnamese. And I don't believe that we feel the responsibility at all. But we are. And there is the economic crisis, as well as human crisis in the daily life. So there is a great deal of disorder. This disorder has come through division of nationalities, religious divisions. One whole group of people believing in certain ideology and the other not at all. Some calling themselves Christian, others Muslim and Hindus, and so on. These separative, destructive forces are at work. That is an accepted fact, whether you believe it or not, whether you accept it or not. These are the causes, fundamentally, of this chaotic existence. And what is a human being to do? Not everlastingly describe the causes. Not everlastingly search out deeper causes for this utter chaos and misery and confusion and sorrow. So, mere description or the analytical process has not solved a thing. And I feel we must approach it entirely differently. And as we said last few times that we met here, we are taking a voyage together. You, as well as the speaker, are working together. It is not that the speaker merely explains and you agree or disagree with what is explained, but rather that we both work hard together to find out if there is not a way which does not lead to disorder, to more confusion, to greater sorrow. So it is your responsibility how you listen and what you are going to do with what you listen. There must be order. Not only in the lives of each one of us, but also outwardly. In the economic world, as well as the intellectual, moral, ethical life. Disorder, like in all mathematics, is absolute order. Not disorder plus little bit of order. And the deeper the problem is, the greater must be the order of a mind that is capable of examining, not with prejudice, not with opinion, not with conditioned thinking, but observing actually what is. And that is extraordinarily difficult for most of us, to see actually what is, not what we think it should be. There is an extraordinary amount of disorder in the world. And as a human being living in this world of disorder, confusion, enormous amount of sorrow, what is it to do? This is really the main issue. What can you, as a human being, living in this country, seeing this terrible disorder, brought about by the army, by the politician, by the priests, by all the individuals, with their selfishness, with their arrogance, with their brutality, with their violence. And one sees this actually going on. And what can you and I do? I do not know if you ever put that question to yourself. Not casually, but in all earnestness, with complete seriousness. Because it's only the serious, the attentive, that is alive. Not the dilettante, not the casual, curious, intellectual inquirer, but actually the man who is very, very serious, not according to a certain pattern of belief in which he believes. All that, those beliefs and dogmas have produced chaos in the world. And being very serious, and we have to be serious, because the house is burning. Not somebody else's house, your house is burning. And we have to be very serious to put it, not only to put it out, but also to bring about a different house that cannot be burnt at any time. A life in which there is no war, no fear, a life of absolute inward order. And this is what we are going to find out. Not only order, but also something much more. Man, throughout the ages, has been seeking something beyond the everyday monotony of life. Something more, which thought has not touched, which is not the outcome of time. And he has been seeking this from the beginning of time. They call it God. They have given it 1,000 names. And few apparently have found it, and having found it, the clever people have organized it and therefore destroyed it. You know, there is a story of devil and a friend walking along the street. And the friend picks up something from the pavement and looks at it. And the friend says, "By Joe, I've found what is true. I found the truth. Here it is." And so the devil says, "I'll help you to organize it." And all the world has organized truth and therefore destroyed it. And is it possible for man to find something not as an idea, not as an experience, not as a formula or a concept, but actually, without any illusion, come upon this timeless, immeasurable reality. Because if we don't find that, life is wasted. Life has no meaning. You may have property, you may live very well, or capable. You may become famous, but without coming upon that, the highest thing, life becomes shallow, empty, meaningless. And discovering the meaninglessness of life, one begins to invent gods, the gods of the state, the gods in the churches, the temples, and so on. So is it possible to come upon this benediction, which is not in any temple, in any church, in any mosque, and to find that out, to come upon it, first there must be order. Absolute, total order within. Order is virtue. And this order is denied when you do not totally, completely deny morality of society. In the total denial of morality, there is morality. Do please understand this. The social morality is no morality at all. The social morality of any culture has produced this chaos in the world. That is, man living in this culture is competitive, greedy, envious, brutal, violent. Though he may have outwardly polished manners, go to the office, go to churches, temples, but inwardly is immoral. And this inward state is producing outward disorder. And so, the morality that man has pursued, which has brought about chaos, is not morality at all. And order is the highest form of a virtue. That is freedom. There is no virtue without freedom. Freedom from imitation. Freedom from fear, authority. Because being afraid, into which we went the other day, this question of fear and whether it's possible at all to be free from this tremendous weight. So we will not go this morning into that question. Without total freedom from fear, I do not see how it is possible to be virtuous. Surely, to be orderly, which means virtuous, is not an imitative process. This is really quite a complex problem, which is, what is it to be virtuous? If it is merely a habit, a repetition of what should be, and the imitation of it, establishing a custom, a tradition, surely that's not virtue at all. Then it's mechanical. It has no meaning. So, habit, whether it's good or bad, is not virtue. And the mind functions within the groove of habits, tradition. And as one has cultivated in the environment of a culture which has become habitual, and therefore not free. So virtue goes with freedom. Therefore one has to understand the full significance of freedom. That is, order is necessary. Complete, absolute inward order. And that's not possible if there is no virtue. And virtue is the outcome, natural outcome of freedom. It is not what you want to do, or a revolt against the established order, or the tradition, or laissez-aller, or become a hippie, capellone, or something or other. That's not freedom at all. Freedom comes only when we understand not intellectually, but actually, in everyday life. The way of thought, the way of the activity, the actual daily effect of our brutality, of our carelessness, indifference, which is to be actually in contact with our enormous selfishness. Therefore, freedom means freedom totally from all authority. Of course, it's rather a difficult pill to swallow. And therefore, it needs a great deal of explanation. The authority of law, the authority of the policeman is necessary. Otherwise, we couldn't have got here this morning. And is there any other authority apart from law, outward necessity of a policeman and so on? Is there any other kind of inward authority? And if there is, what is the need of it? The word authority means the one who has originated something, the author. Not the writer, I don't mean that. The author of an idea, of a concept, of a way of life. Of what should be and what should not be, what is right and what is wrong. According to this, man has behaved according to the sanctions of authority, the inward. And being afraid, we have become followers. It is fear that makes us obey. And the authority is what has been. Do listen to this little bit, if I may suggest, attentively. Because if the mind isn't free from all its conditioning, there's bound to be disorder. If I am conditioned as a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Muslim, all my activity is within the borders of that conditioning, of that limitation. And the authority is the conditioning. The authority of a belief. The authority which power offers, power, safety, security in the church, in any hierarchical position in the world. is the mind capable of being free of authority as yesterday. That is, we are the result of time. We are the result of 1,000 experiences. There are many, many influences that have conditioned man as he is. And the past, what has been, becomes the authority. Not only what has been traditionally, but also what has been which dictates what we should do tomorrow. You understand it? So, authority is not merely the outward demand to be orderly, but also the inward asking that one must be completely secure. So the desire to be secure psychologically is according to the pattern of the past, and therefore the desire to be secure creates authority. I hope this is more or less clear, but if it isn't, I'm sorry, we can't go very deeply into it now, because we haven't time. That's one of the most absurd things, isn't it? Not to have time. Time doesn't make us understand. Explanations don't make us understand. What makes us act immediately is seeing the truth of something. Not all the rigmarole of words, explanations, the structure, the logic, but actually seeing something immediately. That a mind that's crippled with authority, inward authority of any kind, prevents order. You know, experience doesn't bring order. Experience doesn't bring about freedom. On the contrary, you've had experiences of 5,000 years of war, of killing people. New armaments that will destroy thousands of people at one breath. That experience hasn't taught man a thing, except it has taught him at the periphery he has certain advantages, but basically experience in that direction has not taught man anything. He's still violent, he's still brutal, he will kill for any reason. And had experience of sorrow. Someone dying, the ache of loneliness, anxiety, the enormous uncertainty of life, and always demanding that life be secure. And life is never secure. Life is a movement in relationship. And out of that relationship, we want security, permanency. And experience hasn't taught. Experience means to go through something, go through, finish with it. And you cannot finish an experience if that experience leaves a mark, a shadow, an imprint on the mind. If it leaves an imprint on the mind, then the next experience that you have is translated according to the past experience. This is all fairly simple and obvious. So experience only strengthens what has been. And experience does not, under any circumstances, give freedom. And that we are not willing to accept. And a mind that has obeyed so long, that has accepted authority, that has become immoral, that has no quality of virtue. There can be only virtue when there is no conflict, when there is love. And we have not, as human beings, got love. What we have is jealousy, hate, envy. Surely, love, as we said the other day, is not pleasure. Pleasure is the product of thought, cultivated, constantly repeated. And love is not pleasure. It is something entirely different. And to come upon that, there must be freedom too. Freedom from anger, jealousy, violence. And there must be freedom from that whole mechanical process of building an image in all relationships. That is, every relationship that you have, whether it be with your wife or with your friend or with your boss or with anybody, in that relationship, an image is created. There is an image between you and your wife, obviously. She has an image about you, and you have an image about her, which has been built through many years of pleasure, pain, irritation, anger, this self-centered activity on the part of each one, all that has contributed to bring about in that relationship an image. And these two images have relationships and nothing else. So love is not the product of pleasure or thought, and so it cannot be cultivated like virtue. It cannot be manufactured by thought. I do not know if you ever considered what humility is. Humility, like austerity, is not a thing that you can work upon day after day and say, I have learnt to be humble. It's only the vain man that pretends to be humble. Humility comes only when there is no seeking or achievement. That is, when you live totally, completely in the present, which is the totality of time. But if you are gathering power, position, in the name of God, in the name of church, in the name of government, if you dominate in your relationship, whether it be the most intimate family relationship, in that, there is no humility. Humility, like innocence, comes only when the mind is completely quiet. And order, which is so essential, is only possible when there is freedom, which is love. Not divine love and human love, not the love of the one or the many, but just, one daren't use that word. On every screen in the cinema, one uses that word. They use that word in the church, the politician. Everybody uses that word. And therefore has destroyed the beauty, the fullness, the depth of that word. And is it possible to love, which is really the basis of all virtue, and therefore order, living in this world, in this monstrous world? Is it possible to love without envy? Of course, envy is not love. Without jealousy, without brutality. And it's only possible, surely, when we have understood pleasure. Because now, love is pleasure. And realizing that, man has invented the love of God, which is not pleasure. Of course it is. If you're not afraid completely right through your being, both at the conscious and the unconscious level, when there is not a spot of fear, then there is no seeking. Then the mind itself is the highest form of intelligence and therefore virtuous. And this is the foundation to go further. The foundation of order, freedom, therefore virtue and love. This is the foundation upon which we can build. And having laid the foundation, not as an idea, not as an abstract fact, but actually in daily life, then we can begin to inquire if there is something more which is not of time, which cannot be destroyed. To find that out, to come upon it, we must understand meditation. Sorry to introduce that word. Again, that word has been spoilt recently by those people who have come from the East talking about meditation. You know, unless the mind is very still, you cannot see anything. That's a simple psychological fact. If I want to see you or you want to see me, actually, physically, your mind must be quiet. It cannot be chattering. It cannot indulge in images, opinions, judgments. It must be absolutely quiet. And most of our minds do not even know what that word and what lies behind that word. We have a feeling that there must be a certain stillness of the mind. After all, if you are listening to the speaker, and I hope you are, you must give attention. That is, your mind mustn't be out playing golf. Your mind mustn't be wondering what he means by this or that. Your mind must be not only quiet but attentive. And being attentive, it is intense. Therefore, there is a communion between the speaker and yourself. A communion that is intense with a quality of meeting the mind at the same time, at the same intensity, with the same level. Then there is communion. And for that, your mind must be extraordinarily sensitive, alert, quiet. And this word meditation is very common in the East. Whole of Asia knows this word. And they have practiced what they call meditation. You see poor men, ill-clad, ill-fed, sitting under a tree, meditating, his body motionless. And that's been going on in the East for thousands and thousands of years. In that so-called meditation, there is no order. There is only conformity to a pattern. There is no order in the sense which we are talking about. Order which comes from freedom of tradition, imitation, freedom from fear. Those who are meditating want wider, deeper experiences, which can be very easily got through any drug. The psychedelic drugs give you the expansion of consciousness. But that expansion of consciousness is still conditioned. So, meditation is something entirely different. And that is not possible if there is no foundation of order, freedom, and love which has never touched brutality. Then the mind becomes the meditative mind. It is the mind that becomes completely quiet. Because then, without wanting any experience, wanting any further pleasure or visions, these are all very simple to explain, like a Christian having a vision of Christ is the projection of his own conditioning, as the Hindu with his Krishna. He has a vision of that, which is the result of his own conditioning. And as the communist has his vision of what the state should be, or what the citizen should be, because he is conditioned. And visions are fairly simple to have, and it has no meaning really whatsoever, whether you see Christ, the Buddha, or Krishna, or whatever it is, because they are the result of your own psychological state. And what you see, if you experience those things, you're caught more in it. And therefore you're conditioned more. So all that is not meditation. Meditation is the silence of the mind, and in that silence, in that complete alertness, intensity, the mind is no longer the seat of thought. For thought is time, thought is memory, thought is knowledge. And then the mind, being completely quiet, highly sensitive, then it can take a voyage which is timeless, limitless. And that's meditation. And not all the phony stuff of repeating words. You know, that's what they are doing. And it's a very well-known thing in India of repeating words and getting oneself into a peculiar state and thinking that's meditation. You know, you can repeat the word Coca-Cola 10,000 times, and you'll have the most marvelous experiences. Because you can put yourself into a hypnotic state. And that's not reality. Hypnosis, whether it's done by another or by yourself, only projects your own conditioning, your own fears and so on, that have no value whatsoever. So, is it possible then for a mind that has deeply penetrated into this problem, which is of order, the beauty of order, and therefore order, which is not a habit, and which dies every day, and therefore every day it's new. And a quality of love that is not, that has no fear, that's not touched by thought as pleasure. Can one live in this world with that and act from that? That's really the issue. Not whether what you believe in, what you don't believe in. Whether you are a communist or a socialist or a nationalist, all those they're all passé, they're all finished. They have not produced order in this world. On the contrary, they have divided man more and more. Naturally, the young people are in revolt against what has been, and quite rightly. So the question is it possible for a man who is very serious, who doesn't play with all this intellectually, but actually lives it, breathes it? Can he live in this world? In this world that's competitive, aggressive, where you are asked to join the army, in a world that is brutalizing, violent, can you live? Live not negatively, but actively. You know, to totally deny all that's false and everything in this psychologically, in this culture that one has lived, is false. Can one deny it totally? And in the very denial comes the positive. When you see the false as the false, that very act of perception, seeing, is the positive. So one asks oneself whether it is possible to live not as a saint. That's terrible. You know, a saint is recognized by society, by the culture, by the church, or by the temple, and therefore he is no longer a saint. To be free inwardly, to love, to have absolute order that has nothing whatsoever to do with any culture, with any society, with any religion. And is it possible I think the answer is, or rather the question, is unnecessary. If you live that way, there is no other problem. Then you do not ask if it is possible to live in this world. You can live in this world because you are completely outside it. And because you are an outsider in India, in Russia, in Italy, in the world, and you are an outsider because you are free, you have absolute order and have this total sense of deep love, then you live. Then where you are, there is a benediction. What you do then is orderly. There is beauty. And beauty is not something put together by man. Beauty is only when there is complete self-abandonment. The self, with the me, with all the aches and loneliness, despairs, anxieties, fears. Then you will live in this world as a human being.